Her birthday looked like a showcase of success. A sprawling house, snow-white flowers, gold leaf napkins, a cake with shimmering candles, and a silence that cut deeper than any words. Lily Sterling sat in her wheelchair at the center of this performance. Her dress was flawless, her hair was doll perfect, and a growing void filled her eyes because not a single guest had managed to look past the picture and see the person. The guests whispered at the bar, giggled, and exchanged compliments on how tastefully the party was arranged, stealing glances at Lily as if she were a project. Too bitter a topic for conversation, too inconvenient an emotion for their glossy profiles. Her father, William Sterling, a successful CEO, greeted guests with a perfect smile. Her mother, Evelyn, carried herself as if every movement were a rehearsal for a camera. Lily tried to smile back, but the smile felt like a counterfeit coin, shiny but worthless. Just when it seemed the party had finally dissolved into elegant emptiness, a boy in a worn jacket and dirty sneakers appeared in the doorway. Marcus Rivera, the son of the cleaner who had scrubbed the tiles in this house and hauled grocery bags all year. He approached not with doomed caution, but with wonder. His face held no judgment, only the curiosity and courage that come from backyards and street games. "Can I sit here?" he asked softly, and his voice shattered the pause like a single drop of water in a stagnant room. Marcus didn't dramatize. He handed Lily a piece of cake, told her a funny story about his puppy, and started drawing silly figures for her on a napkin. Their conversation was simple, but his every gesture, honest, unpracticed, seemed to pull real life toward him, the kind of life the adults had long ago traded for proper poses. Lily, who had been told everywhere that she was a burden and a heavy load, suddenly felt an old warmth return to her palms. She laughed, loudly, genuinely, and for a few seconds, the room became a real home. Then the shocks began. The first wasn't a revelation, but the fact that someone had started a live stream for friends from their phone. The image hit the internet, and soon thousands of viewers were witnessing the elite discussing a child in a wheelchair as an object of pity. Comments flew, hashtags flared, and a call from a journalist caught William off guard within the minute. The reputation the family had worked on for years cracked under the blows of public anger. But the second, more personal blow was worse for the Sterlings. Marcus, holding an old, yellowed photograph, quietly told Lily, "This is my mom," and pointed to a woman in the crowd, the very one everyone called the family nanny, and told where to stand. The photo showed a young Evelyn, and next to her stood a small child, and the inscription on the back named the boy with a name that was different yet familiar. At that moment, a rustle went through the living room. A folded paper was visible in Marcus's pocket, an old letter proving that William had had an affair years ago, that the family had a hidden history, and that Marcus was no stranger. He had a blood reason to be here. The third twist, the cruelest. The same family friend who had been whispering with others earlier accidentally let it slip on the live stream that on the fateful night of Lily's accident, a man was present whose car was parked in the garden, and a phone camera, accidentally turned on by a young man visiting the house, had already recorded that the garage door was ajar. Rumors turned into suspicion. Lily's fall no longer looked like an accident. That same night, snippets of old conversations were leaked online, discussing the insurance amount and the benefits, and the air in the house grew thick with fear and anger. At the peak of the scandal, Lily received more than just friendship from Marcus. He gave her a tool, a voice. She stood up, not because she was suddenly healed, but because people can lean on words, and delivered a quiet speech that sounded sharper than any verdict. It held no plea and no revenge. There was only the truth, which exposed the emptiness of luxurious words and the power of childlike simplicity to break even the armor of lies. William tried to speak in response, but his words were fragile. Evelyn cried, not from remorse, but from the realization that their world was a house of cards, and Marcus held the key to the wind. The party ended not with fireworks, but with an empty living room where the remains of candles smoldered, and a paper napkin with Marcus's childish drawing lay on the floor. Soon, investigations began. Public attention did not let the family go, and for the first time in her life, Lily felt that her pain was heard. Marcus returned to his neighborhood, but a new, vulnerable connection remained between him and Lily. And in that connection was the hope that humanity could destroy facades and force people to answer for their actions. They said she was a ghost in her own home, a porcelain doll arranged just so, until a boy who cleaned floors asked a question that set their gilded world on fire. This wasn't a story about a girl in a wheelchair. It was about the moment a whisper becomes a weapon, and everyone was about to hear it. The air in the Sterling mansion was thick with the scent of money and lilies, a cloying sweetness that clung to the back of your throat. It was the smell of Lily's life, a fragrance designed to mask the stale odor of loneliness. From her wheelchair, she watched the party swirl around her, a kaleidoscope of silk, champagne, and teeth. So many teeth, all bared in smiles that never reached the eyes. She was the centerpiece of her own 18th birthday, an exquisitely dressed tragedy they could all feel good about pitying. People's gazes slid over her, a frictionless glide of polite acknowledgement before they moved on to someone more comfortable. The quiet snickers were tucked into the folds of conversations about stock options and summering in the Hamptons. The casual condescension was a language she understood better than English. A sigh from a woman in a Chanel suit as she passed. An eye roll between two men by the bar. A bless your heart, delivered with the gentle force of a slap. Each one was a small, sharp stone added to the pile crushing her chest. A weary heat, the slow burn of invisible rage, coiled in her stomach. She was a Sterling, yes, but in this room, she was just a problem, tastefully decorated. The moment crystallized when Bryce Alcott, a man whose fortune was built on gutting companies and whose face was a permanent sneer, leaned down toward her. The sour scent of his expensive scotch washed over her. "You know, it's just wonderful what your parents do for you," he said, his voice a conspiratorial boom that carried across the suddenly quiet room. "Keeping you involved." He patted her shoulder, a gesture of ownership, of dismissal. He then turned to a small group, loud enough for half the party to hear. "Takes a special kind of person to handle a situation like this. Real charity." He winked. Someone filmed it, of course. A vertical video for an Instagram story. The caption, no doubt, something sanctimonious and vile. Laughter rippled through the guests. Not cruel, but worse. Dismissive. The kind of laughter that says, "You are not one of us. You are a topic." Lily lowered her eyes, the familiar sting of tears threatening. She swallowed the bitterness, a taste like rust and salt. And in that silent, public humiliation, a tiny, cold spark ignited in the darkness. It was the beginning of a fire. Then the double doors swung open, and the stale, conditioned air of the party was disturbed by a gust of real-world wind. In walked Marcus Rivera, wearing a worn-out Levi's jacket and sneakers that had seen more of the city in a week than most of the guests had in a lifetime. He was the son of Maria, the woman who made the Sterling mansion gleam, who was at this very moment silently clearing away discarded glasses with an expression of practiced invisibility. Marcus wasn't supposed to be here. He scanned the room, not with the deference of a servant, but with the wide-eyed curiosity of an explorer who had stumbled upon a strange, alien civilization. His eyes landed on Lily, and he didn't flinch. He didn't look away. He saw her. The space around them seemed to freeze. The contrast was a physical blow. The boy in rags, looking at the girl in riches, and for the first time all night, someone was actually seeing. The heart of every guest who noticed seemed to skip a beat. This wasn't part of the script. This was real. He walked over, his steps sure and quiet on the marble floor. He didn't offer pity or platitudes. He just pulled up a small ottoman. "Is this seat taken?" he asked, his voice soft but clear, cutting through the murmur of the party. Lily, stunned, just shook her head. He broke off a piece of her untouched birthday cake with his fingers and held it out. "Happy birthday," he said, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. He told her about his dog, a scruffy mutt named Chaos, who had eaten an entire stick of butter that morning. He pulled a pen from his pocket and, on a gold leaf napkin, began to draw a cartoon version of the dog with a ridiculously fat belly. The conversation was simple, grounded in a world of scuffed knees and cheap pizza, a world utterly foreign to the one around them. And then it happened. A sound no one had heard in years. Lily laughed. It wasn't the polite, breathy chuckle of a Sterling. It was a loud, uninhibited, genuine laugh that erupted from her belly, full of a life they had all assumed was extinguished. It was a manifesto. In that moment, the pity in the room curdled into a stunned, uncomfortable respect. She was not a doll. She was alive. The first shockwave hit not from inside the room, but from the glowing screens in everyone's pockets. The video of Bryce Alcott's comment, followed by the jarring cut to Marcus and Lily laughing, had gone viral. The internet, with its swift and brutal judgment, had a narrative. Rich monster mocks disabled girl. Humble boy shows true class. Hashtags bloomed like toxic algae. Sterling shame, Lily and Marcus, money can't buy heart. William Sterling's phone began to vibrate incessantly, a frantic buzzing against his heart. A journalist from the New York Post was on the line. The carefully constructed facade of the Sterling family, polished over decades, was cracking in real time. The urgent task was no longer schmoozing investors, it was damage control of an epic scale. But this was only the beginning. In the chaos, Marcus leaned closer to Lily, his expression serious now. He pulled a faded photograph from his jacket pocket. "I wanted to show you this," he whispered, placing it in her hand. It showed a much younger Evelyn Sterling, her arm around another woman. And that woman was his mother, Maria. They were smiling, looking like sisters. "My mom said you should see it," Marcus said. It was the first tool, the first piece of a puzzle Lily didn't even know existed. The online mob, in its insatiable hunger, had made Lily a symbol. She was no longer just a girl at a party. She was a cause, a viral martyr. Her social media, dormant for years, exploded with followers and messages of support. She was thrust into a new role she never asked for, a spokesperson for the overlooked. A profound sense of vertigo washed over her. Imposter syndrome. Who was she to be this person? A girl who hadn't left her house in months, whose world was circumscribed by these 4 opulent walls. But as she read the messages, stories from other people who felt invisible, a strange strength began to coalesce within her. She was terrified, but for the first time, she wasn't alone. She took a deep breath and made her first post in 3 years. A simple photo of the napkin Marcus had drawn on. The caption was one word: "Thank you." It was a step into the unknown, a declaration that she was ready to own her story. The backlash was immediate and venomous. The whispers of the party guests became the shouts of anonymous trolls. "She's an attention seeker." This is all a calculated PR stunt by her father. That sob story with the poor kid is probably staged. The old poisons, classism, ableism, surfaced in the digital tide. A prominent conservative pundit went on Fox News and sneered about poverty tourism and the weaponization of disability. A forgotten invitation to a charity gala was screenshotted and presented as proof of her social climbing. The knot in her throat, the one she'd lived with for years, tightened. But this time, something was different. She didn't retreat. She focused on the work, the truth. She read every article, every comment, every piece of the story that was unfolding around her. The complex tasks now came at her fast and hard. Marcus, seeing her resolve, gave her the second piece of the puzzle. It was an old, folded letter he'd found in his mother's things. A love letter. From William Sterling to Maria Rivera, dated 19 years ago. It spoke of a secret relationship, of promises made and broken. It spoke of a child, Marcus. William Sterling was his father. The revelation landed like a physical blow. Her father, the pillar of morality and success, had a secret family, a secret son he'd allowed to live in the shadows while his mother cleaned his house. The betrayal was dizzying, but the third shock was the one that shattered everything. An anonymous source, later revealed to be a disgruntled former security guard, leaked a security log to a journalist. On the night of Lily's accident, a fall down the grand staircase that had paralyzed her, there was an unauthorized visitor, a man whose name was connected to a rival corporation, and the family friend who had been gossiping at the party, drunk and panicked on a live-streamed interview, let it slip that she'd overheard William and this man arguing about an insurance policy on Lily just weeks before the fall. The accident was no longer an accident. It was a possibility, a dark, monstrous suspicion. Lily, armed with these terrible truths, methodically connected the dots. The online cynics who had called her a fraud were now her most ardent supporters, demanding investigations. Justice for Lily became a global trend. She was no longer just a symbol. She was the quiet, immovable center of a hurricane. Her silent dignity became her power. People didn't just send messages of support, they sent information. Old employees of her father's company, former friends of the family, People who had been silenced for years began to come forward. Her inbox became a repository of the Sterling's secrets. Where people had once whispered about her place, they now repeated her words, sharing her few, carefully chosen posts as gospel. She never raised her voice. She never had to. Her calm, persistent focus on the facts was more powerful than any rant. She was directing a storm, and she was doing it from her chair with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing left to lose. The story became so big that it transcended the gossip columns. A renowned investigative journalist, a woman famous for taking down corrupt politicians, took on the case. Inspired by Lily's courage, she launched a docuseries titled The Invisible Girl. It wasn't just about Lily. It was about all the people society chooses not to see. The first episode, focusing on the lives of domestic workers in wealthy households and featuring a heart-wrenching interview with Maria Rivera, won an Emmy. Lily, working as a consultant on the series, became the face of a new initiative funded by the network, the Unseen Project, a foundation dedicated to providing legal resources and a public platform for whistleblowers and victims of corporate and domestic abuse. The culmination was not a press conference or a trial, but a live television interview. It was just Lily and the journalist on a simple set. No audience. She wore a plain black sweater. She looked directly into the camera, into the eyes of millions. She didn't need to physically stand to command the room. She stood on the power of her words. "For years, I believed I was a burden," she began, her voice quiet but steady, a clear, cold bell in the silence. "I was told my life was a tragedy. But the real tragedy is a world that values a perfect image more than a human heart. The real tragedy is the lies we tell ourselves to maintain our comfort." She calmly laid out the facts, the affair, the insurance policy, the questions surrounding her fall. There was no anger in her voice, no plea for pity, just the unassailable weight of the truth. "When they laughed at me, I was hurt. But I learned something. I learned that their laughter was a shield to hide their own emptiness. Today, I'm not here for revenge. I am here to say that we, the unseen, will no longer be silent." The world seemed to hold its breath. When she finished, the silence in the studio was absolute. Then, across the country, in living rooms and bars, people began to stand up. They applauded. Some of them were crying. The fall was swift and brutal. Bryce Alcott's company was ruined by boycotts. The family friend became a social pariah. And the Sterlings, they were utterly destroyed. William was forced to resign as CEO amidst a shareholder revolt and a federal investigation. Evelyn, exposed as complicit in decades of deceit, retreated from public life entirely. They issued a stilted, lawyer-approved apology that convinced no one. Justice arrived not with a gavel, but with the unstoppable force of public opinion. Their empire of lies had crumbled into dust. Lily never had to point a finger. She simply held up a mirror, and they were undone by their own reflection. The symbol of the entire revolution was not a document or a photograph. It was a simple gold leaf napkin. The drawing of chaos, the fat-bellied dog, became a viral meme, an icon of authenticity in a world of artifice. The original napkin was acquired by the Newseum in Washington, D.C., and placed in a small, climate-controlled glass case. A simple plaque beside it read, "The Drawing That Roared." It became one of their most popular exhibits. People took pictures of it, sharing their own stories of being overlooked, of finding an unexpected connection that changed everything. It was a reminder of the quietest person in the room could have the loudest voice. Months later, the storm had passed. The mansion was sold. The investigations were ongoing. Lily now lived in a quiet, accessible apartment overlooking the Hudson River. The evening light, soft and golden, streamed through the large windows. The city lights were beginning to twinkle on, a galaxy of other lives, other stories. In her hands, she held the napkin, now laminated and precious. She traced the silly, joyful lines of the drawing. A quiet promise formed in her mind, a whisper to the reflection in the glass, a reflection that was no longer a ghost, but a woman, whole and strong. "For all of you still in the shadows," she murmured, "they will see you. I will make them see you." The light from the city, from the world outside her window, was warm, a steady, victorious glow. Talent doesn't care about the clothes you wear, the color of your skin, or the chair you sit in. Remember this story so that one day you don't walk past the person who is still invisible.